Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a partnership that was supposed to completely revolutionize your iPhone. But, well, instead, it's devolved into an all-out corporate war. We're talking about Apple and OpenAI. What started off as this blockbuster software integration has rapidly mutated into a bitter, high-stakes fight over allegedly stolen trade secrets, poached talent, and literally the entire future of consumer hardware. We're dropping right into the middle of the action with Apple's explosive 2026 lawsuit. Now, for a company that famously treats its cafeteria menus like highly classified state secrets, publicly calling a partner's business rotten to its core is a massive, massive escalation. Apple is officially openly accusing OpenAI of widespread, systematic corporate espionage.
Section 1. The Bombshell Lawsuit.
Apple is definitely not just throwing around empty threats here. They've named names, and they've detailed an incredibly elaborate heist of their most closely guarded hardware secrets. To really wrap your head around the scale of what Apple is alleging, think about this number: 400. Apple claims OpenAI has poached over 400 former Apple employees. So we're not talking about a couple of rogue engineers jumping ship. Apple is arguing that this is a highly coordinated, aggressive campaign to jumpstart OpenAI's brand new consumer hardware division by basically strip mining Apple's top talent. And the tactics? Apple claims this theft ran at every level. It is wild. They allege that employees exploited a cloud authentication bug to just download thousands of proprietary files. And it gets crazier. They claim OpenAI actually directed job candidates who were still working at Apple to literally smuggle physical parts out of the office for show and tell interviews. They even allegedly coached these new hires on exactly how to evade Apple's exit interview security. Just incredible stuff. The lawsuit points the finger at some very specific people. You've got Tang Yutan, a former Apple VP who helped design the iPhone, who is now sitting as OpenAI's chief hardware officer. Apple claims he's the one who orchestrated those physical part show-and-tell interviews. Then there's Cheng Liam, a senior engineer accused of exploiting that cloud bug to download over 1,000 confidential files after he had already left the company. And at the center of it all, Ionic Products, a startup that Apple claims is just a corporate shell created specifically to utilize all these misappropriated designs.
Section 2. The Partnership That Failed.
So to really understand why Apple is going straight for the jugular here, we have to flash back. We need to look at how a seemingly perfect AI marriage completely fell apart in record time. Back in 2024, everybody was hyping this massive ChatGPT integration for Siri. But then, just over a year later, in late 2025, OpenAI suddenly buys a hardware startup. By February 2026, Apple is firing off warning letters about data theft and getting absolute radio silence in return. By May, OpenAI execs are privately calling the Apple deal a total failure. And then boom, July hits and the lawsuit drops. 2 years. That's all it took for a flagship software deal to dissolve into total litigation. The friction really started with a massive mismatch in expectations. See, OpenAI thought they were getting a deal on par with Google's multi-billion-dollar Safari search agreement. They figured hundreds of millions of iPhone users would just be funneled directly into paid ChatGPT Plus subscriptions. But Apple's reality? Totally different. Because Apple is so incredibly strict about privacy, they made users manually invoke ChatGPT. That effectively buried it behind all this friction, turning it into a sidelined opt-in plugin instead of the star of the show. And Apple's legendary culture of secrecy? Yeah, that just made things so much worse. OpenAI was essentially kept entirely in the dark about how their own product would actually be used on these devices. There's this telling quote from an unnamed OpenAI executive who basically said they felt Apple demanded a leap of faith, but never actually put in an honest effort to make the integration work. In fact, OpenAI's internal data show that users overwhelmingly preferred just using the standalone ChatGPT app anyway.
Section 3. The Hardware Threat.
Okay, so the software friction was bad, sure. But the real spark that ignited this corporate war? OpenAI decided they didn't just want to be an app on your phone anymore. They wanted to build the phone itself. The major turning point hit in late 2025. Apple executives were reportedly absolutely fuming when OpenAI dropped a staggering $6 billion to acquire that startup we mentioned earlier, IO Products. The reason Apple was so mad? IO Products was founded by Apple's legendary former design chief, Johnny Ive. This was OpenAI planting a massive flag, declaring a direct push into consumer hardware, and leading it with the exact people who designed Apple's most iconic gadgets. And OpenAI isn't just trying to build some gimmicky gadget. They're trying to create an entirely new paradigm. We are talking about an iPhone killer, a voice-first mobile smart speaker
that functions as a human-like AI companion. And here's the real kicker. Sources say they were targeting a launch for the first half of 2026. That put them on an immediate, unavoidable collision course with Apple. According to Apple's lawsuit, OpenAI used a very specific playbook to try and pull this off. Step 1, poach Apple's hardware leads by waving massive stock packages in their faces. Step 2, systematically extract all those proprietary designs, supplier details, and manufacturing techniques. And Step 3, use all of that allegedly stolen knowledge to rapidly launch an AI device that rivals the iPhone, completely bypassing the decades it usually takes to figure out a complex supply chain. So, what are the stakes here? Well, they go way beyond just a simple cash payout. Apple is asking a judge for a preliminary injunction to literally stop OpenAI in its tracks. If a court forces OpenAI to freeze development and purge anything derived from Apple, it would absolutely devastate their hardware launch timeline. And even worse for OpenAI, it creates massive legal drag right at the exact moment they're preparing for a highly anticipated Wall Street IPO.
Section 4. Apple pivots to Google. Realizing that OpenAI was fast becoming a direct hardware competitor and dealing with their own massive internal AI struggles, Apple executed $1 billion survival move. They had to act, largely because of one terrifying statistic. Internal testing showed Siri was failing on 33% of requests. 1 in 3 requests, just failing. For a company that stakes its entire reputation on a seamless user experience, that isn't just an embarrassment, that is a 5-alarm fire. Apple knew they desperately needed an outside foundational AI engine to save Siri, and clearly, OpenAI was no longer an option. When Apple looked at their options, the choice actually became pretty clear. They chose to pay Google a reported $1 billion a year for Gemini. And why? Well, privacy was the absolute biggest factor. Gemini fit flawlessly into Apple's new private cloud compute architecture, whereas OpenAI relies heavily on direct data access for training. On a corporate level, Google was already a highly stable partner, paying Apple $20 billion a year for default search, while OpenAI was morphing into this aggressive hardware rival. By making this choice, Apple essentially handed Google the ultimate public relations victory. They went out and officially declared Google's Gemini as the most capable foundation for the upcoming Apple Intelligence rollout. It's a total mic drop moment. It solidifies Google as the inescapable AI infrastructure of our time, giving them a direct line into the pockets of billions of iPhone users, and leaving OpenAI standing completely out in the cold. Section 5. The future for users. So what does all this boardroom drama and corporate espionage actually mean for the smartphone that you carry around in your pocket every single day? Well, as a consumer, your iPhone experience is about to change dramatically with iOS 27. Siri is finally getting the massive IQ boost we've all been begging for. It's going to understand context, it'll handle complex reasoning, but it's going to be Google's brain doing all the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, Apple is introducing a new extension system, so if you really want to use ChatGPT or maybe Anthropic's Claude, you still can, but they're going to be treated as just another optional app that you have to manually route your query through. Ultimately, as these two absolute titans clash over trade secrets and the future of agentic AI, the entire tech landscape has completely shifted. OpenAI walked away from the biggest distribution platform in the world to gamble on its own hardware, and Apple locked arms with Google to protect its walled garden. So, with Apple aggressively protecting its turf and OpenAI fighting for its hardware future, who wins the AI war that will dictate our next decade of tech? Keep that question in mind as we watch this incredible battle unfold.